Thanks. So, okay, it does look like we're about to go live. So, good evening, everybody. I'm Mac McCullough at Willard Library, and here we are with another drop of stories in Sundown. And I have with me tonight Judge Tracie Tomak, who is a Battle Creek native, a Harper Creek grad. She is the first woman elected to the district court in Calhoun County, and she also led, spearheaded, created the Domestic Violence Intervention Court. And we're going to talk about all that stuff. So thank you so much for coming on, Tracy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very flattered.
Well, I was flattered when I ran into you at Cafe Rica, and you said, I would just love to be on your program. And I made a note right away.
Oh,
So.
I watch the people that you interview, and you just really tap into these huge contributors to the community. So I feel very lesser than those that have come before me. And that's why I think I put something on Facebook. I hope I don't disappoint, but it's just so great how you get these people from all corners to come in and talk about Battle Creek.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, there's always more to cover. There's a lot of great people in this town.
There are.
Yeah. One of the things I like to talk about with this program is that really try to capture people walking in their purpose. And I think that's what we're here to talk about today. And there's so much that we could talk about, as I just mentioned, but I really like to start with your backstory, because that's kind of interesting too. Why law, and how did you end up going into law in the first place?
Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of the long version. I love my backstory because it's a mess, and it is not a straight shot to what I always thought I'd do. I went to and graduated from Harper Creek in '85, so I will age myself. And
I got you beat.
Yeah. And in high school, I didn't have the priorities that I wanted to go on and do anything in particular. I just knew I wanted to go to Michigan State and I wanted to have fun. And looking back, I was way too young and immature to do that. But my goodness, did I have a good time. So I went to Michigan State. My parents worked really hard to pay for that, and I wasted it. And my 5th year there, still hadn't graduated, and my parents pulled the plug. That's it. So now it breaks my heart that I didn't graduate from Michigan State, but it's an education that really shaped what I was going to do next. And I do like to think of it as a very twisted and curvy path. So then I had to work a lot of jobs, usually 2, sometimes 3 jobs, different retail jobs. I tried to find a daytime job. And I finally went back and finished my degree. And then I ended up working for State Farm Insurance. Prior to that, I did work for a bank. So these 2 experiences helped lead me toward law. At the bank, I worked with credit card disputes. And so you have like this mini book of what the rules and regulations are. Loved it. And then you go to insurance and you have the insurance policy and the regulations. Loved that too. And I was working with State Farm. I moved to Bloomington, Illinois in about 2000. And in 2003, I ended up having tonsil cancer. And that was a huge change in my life, and one of the best and worst things that's happened to me. The other worst and best thing prior to that, I lost my dad in '95 to cancer. So I looked at those experiences as God kind of reaching down and saying, you are not doing what we need, and we're going to just break everything and make it a better path for you. So after cancer, I just knew I can't die in a cubicle somewhere at this huge company. And I finally decided to go to law school. And it was a huge start over. I was 35. I owned a home. I had a great job. And everyone around me said, you can't leave this and start over. You can't. And I just said, well, I'm going to. So that's what led me to law, really, was that cancer experience and surviving it.
I'm going to ask again, why law?
I loved the fact of helping people, and it became my number one priority to be able to help one person in my life. I mean, really help, not answer a call at, the corporate headquarters, but to really change someone's life that needed true help. And I had the skills I believed, and I did a lot of reading. What did I like to do? What was I good at? What did I not like to do? Let's be honest. I didn't like math. I didn't like anything like that, but I really liked understanding a policy and procedure and arguing it. I knew it good. I did it at the bank. I did it with State Farm. And so I thought, if I know the law good, I can help one person, and then my life will be worth it. And that was my passion for law school. I'm going to help somebody.
Wow. Wow. Did you imagine yourself being a judge when you went to law school?
Never. And in fact, I always said, I never want to be a judge. I never want that responsibility. I never want to put myself out there. And part of it was because of my twisted path. I failed out of Michigan State. I, have made personal mistakes. I thought, I can't be in the public eye. What if people say mean things about me? When I realized I needed to be a judge, I realized I was going to take that on, and it's excruciating. And I went through a lot. My family went through a lot, because when you put yourself out there, there will be people that lie about you, that twist things about you. And it was really, I think it was worse than having cancer.
Wow.
It was, but it was also amazing, and I wouldn't change it for anything. So that was kind of the third best and worst thing that ever happened to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
And like I said, we could talk about so much. And funny, when I was going to school for journalism, we had this rule. No, when I went into journalism, we had a rule, 3 rules: never trust an editor, never trust an editor, and never trust an editor. And then I went on to become an editor. And I'm just kind of curious about that pull, to really be in that, and to take that on, and to endure, being under that microscope like that, and having people twist your record or twist your motivations or what have you.
Right.
What kept you focused? Why did you want that so much? Because
the reason I wanted to run for judge finally, and it was like a light switch flicked in me, and I just thought, oh no. And it took me a week or so by myself to do it. I put myself through it knowingly, because I was the type of judge I wanted to see on the bench. And there were a lot of great diverse judges, but there was no one like me. And what was important about that to me is I was a different kind of lawyer too. And I was lucky enough to practice with people that felt the same way I did. Lawyers see people at their most vulnerable, at just a crisis in their lives, and it's so easy to take advantage of that and to charge them more money and to bill them for every little thing. And we made it our mission that we were never going to do anything to get money out of it. We truly wanted to help people. Of course, we had to make a living, but we weren't in it to become a huge firm and to drive the Mercedes and live on the lake. We were in it to help people, and to find others like that was just a miracle. And so I wanted to take that to the bench. I respect the institution of the judiciary, but I'm just Tracy. When I'm in that courtroom and people call me judge, it's the role that I'm playing. I'm still Tracy from Harper Creek, who got speeding tickets left and right, and did a lot of stupid things in my youth. I'm just me, but I love that I can, in that position, reach out to other people in their darkest hour. And treat them in a way that maybe they haven't been treated before. I did it as a lawyer, and I'm now able to do it on the bench.
Yeah, I can't relate to that mistakes and stuff, but I'm sure a lot of people can.
Yeah, you didn't make any.
No, but actually, one of the quotes that I remember reading when you were running was that the more you were involved in it, the more you could see that the court needed you.
Yeah.
And how did you come to that conclusion?
They still need me, whether they want me or not, and whether they admit it or not. And that's because when my other job at the bank, and then also at State Farm, was a business process improvement analyst. So I was trained for many years to take a look at something and figure out how to make it more efficient and how to improve it. Nothing is good enough. And the biggest red flag is, well, this is how we've always done it. So I am a pain in the butt to people at the court, because I'm always, why do we do this? Well, because the judges 30 years ago, they wanted to. Well, they're not here anymore. And I have all these ideas, and it's difficult because I have so many ideas, and it's an institution that moves slower than anything I've ever seen. So it's a lot of friction. I bring up things. I want to meet constantly. The other judges, I don't want to meet. I just want to go run my courtroom. And I'm just so excited. We have to meet, and I have ideas, and we can do these things. So I've tried to find things that just apply to my courtroom,
Right.
because even though there are 9 of us serving Calhoun County, everybody approaches their courtroom differently. So I have no basis to ever tell someone else what to do, and they don't tell me what to do, and we all just try to make our own difference.
Yeah. You're doing such a good job of paying attention to me. You're not seeing probably the comments that I put up. Matt Crosby had said yes, and then Naomi Sakota remembers you saying it coolly, leave it better than you found it.
Yep.
So very nice.
Yes, that was a phrase of mine. I always love to join clubs, and I seem to always end up as president because, it's doing really well, but we can do better. And then when I leave and you become president, you make it better. And it should just be a continual process. And that's what I believe about everything. And the judiciary tends to be very slow.
Yeah.
It's good enough. It works.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the the glass ceiling kind of thing. We're seeing more and more of that being broken in the judiciary. I mean, obviously, we just had a Supreme Court justice, a Black woman at it. The significance of being a woman in a court, and what you talked about before was doing things the way we always have done them. I mean, that's a pitfall, I would say, of any kind of close. I mean, it was kind of an old boys network, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
It maybe still is to some degree.
To a great degree, it is.
Although you're chipping away at that.
I chip away whether they like it or
And your
not,
colleagues,
but my intentions are good. I value the history. I value the other people that I serve with, and I'm just trying to get them to look at things differently. I see it around the state with the other judges when we go to conferences. I have a group of female district court judges, and they're from all over the state. There's 6 of us, and so we constantly keep in touch and share our frustrations and if we have a question, we touch base with each other because we all have the same philosophy. Let's make this better. What have you tried? What are you doing? What did you experience? And so it's not just what I have in Calhoun County. I'm really reaching out across the state. And that's something that that I think we need to do better in Calhoun County. What's happening in Kalamazoo? Well, we're different than Kalamazoo. I know we are. I don't want to copy it, but let's see what they're doing and why are they doing it and how does it work? And that's how my mind is always ruling. What can we do differently?
Yeah. And I don't, by asking the question, I don't mean to imply that, a man or a white man or any can't come in and also be a change agent.
Right.
But I'm wondering if now we have 3 judges in Calhoun County Court, with female judges.
4.
4, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Pardon me. The significance of that in the quality of the court, do you think? Having a diverse, backgrounds, genders, all that stuff.
I think it's helped a lot. And it's not only the male to female ratio, but it's the number of prosecutors that are on the bench versus the number of defense attorneys, because that's a very different background in the way that you look at a case. And I did my internship with our prosecutor's office, and I loved it. And I could have seen myself as a prosecutor, but that didn't work out. So I started my own firm. But that diversity is, when you look at a case, the prosecutors, how can we get them? What's the maximum thing we can get them for? And the defense attorney looks at, I'm going to take a look at everything the police did. Did that go well from the start, from the moment there was contact? And then they look at, what did the prosecutor's office charge? And was that appropriate? So it's really, I used to say as a defense attorney, my job is to make sure the police did their job. So we were holding each other in check. And that diversity of thought is really important. We didn't always have as much as we do now.
Right. Yeah. I didn't have this as one of my questions, but you raise a point for me that the effectiveness of your defense as a defendant really, money matters. Economics matter.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we have a new public defender. How's it going? And how do we make that better so that justice really is equally distributed, equitably distributed in our community?
Well, it is inequitable still, but to the other extreme. So the public defender, that whole effort to have that in every county is one of the greatest things I've seen in my whole adult life. When I was a defense attorney and would be court appointed, it was $100 to represent someone for a misdemeanor, and it was roughly $500 for a felony. So think about that. I took it very seriously, but certainly when I would get a $2,500 retainer versus a $100 client, I would try so hard to treat them equally, but people are human beings. Now the public defender's office, they have a different funding unit. They get money from the state. So they actually have more resources right now than the prosecutor's office. So things are unbalanced, but on the favor of the defense. I'm okay with that right now, but I think it should actually be equal.
Mm-hmm.
We should have, because that's how our justice system is meant to be. And I love the system. And the system is imperfect and it's filled with imperfect human beings, but it's the best in the world. So I really love our public defender's office, and I'm hoping that the prosecutor's office can find the funding to equalize again. Because it's not equal, and we have a lot of problems in the courtroom because of it.
Right. So I want to pivot and talk about the Domestic Violence Intervention Court. I mean, that's something that you really led, right?
Absolutely.
So talk about that. Did you know you were going to do that when you started?
I knew that I wanted more specialty courts. So I had 3 ideas when I was running. One was an eviction diversion program. That's next on my list. The other was a misdemeanor drug court. Well, when marijuana was legalized at that same election, there was no need for a misdemeanor drug court. Yeah. My other was domestic violence. And I had represented so many people as a defense attorney in domestic violence, and that's really where my trial experience was. Not a lot of trials. We had at the time I took the bench, the average was 4 to 5 trials per year in the entire district court. So I was criticized for not having a lot of trial experience, but when you only have 4 to 5, and thinking of all the cases and clients out there, but the ones that I had mainly done were domestic violence. Mm-hmm. So I went to the chief judge at the time and said, I really want to do this. And right away he said, you can't, because we're so depleted of mental health professionals. I can't afford to let any go to a new specialty court. Our other courts are already shorthanded. So there were a list of some other things that I needed to overcome. Well, in talking with our care provider, who at the time worked for Summit Point, she said, well, then you know what? I'm going to leave Summit Point and open my own business and just do domestic violence. And so and her name is Julie Roberts. She is incredible. And by taking that leap of faith, she's the individual that's changing lives. And so then I was able to say, I'm not taking resources from anybody else. I have my very own person. And I also have a provider at KPAP, Robert Chattel, who is equally amazing. So that's how we got to start it. I had to overcome the reasons why I couldn't.
Well, and you found ways around it. I think I read in the Second Wave media story that Jane Simons, my press last week, you were able to do it without adding additional expense.
That's right, because I already had a probation officer assigned to my courtroom, and she is very passionate about domestic violence. Then we had a representative from Summit Point who comes to court to assist victims. She was already doing that. Once I got the care providers, I didn't need a new position the only thing I had to do was get the blessing of my benchmates to rearrange the docketing a little bit so that I could have participants come in. So we started February 2020, and you remember March 2020.
Yeah.
And then everything shut down. So we immediately switched to Zoom. And I think August of 2020, we had almost 80 participants. It was incredible. Now we're down to just under 50, and that's more manageable. But the people that we have seen come through there, not everybody makes it, but those that have, I leave the bench after, and I go back to my chambers and I cry. I do. It's unbelievable. And to think back, all I wanted to do was help one person. So every time I see someone it's just like, oh, I can't believe the blessings that I get to live and be a part of.
Yeah. I mean, that caseload you were talking about, I mean, that was during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
People shut at home. I mean, Calhoun County is, well, I know it's the second busiest shelter in the state. I don't know if
It
we have
is.
the second highest rate or not, but it's obviously a serious issue here.
It is.
And a lot of places reported seeing increase in domestic violence
Yes.
cases.
Battle Creek has a lot. We have the blessing right now of domestic violence unit with Battle Creek Police Department. Throughout the county, most of the cases, significantly most, happen in the city of Battle Creek. They happen over and over by the same perpetrators for the most part. So we now have a detective that oversees a team, and he is part of the DVIC review team. But we've had support from every law enforcement agency to help us build it, to understand what we need from them on scene when they approach a person. And then while their case is pending, the victim is protected by a no contact order known as Public Act 53. So they work so closely, and that means if you're not supposed to have contact with your alleged victim, and you do, the police get a report to me immediately, and then I immediately take action. And I'm very strict, because the one thing about domestic violence that is always on my mind, other than gang violence, it's the one crime that is a predictor of homicide. You know, you see people walking around. How can you imagine that guy is someday going to kill someone?
Yeah.
But when they're involved in domestic violence, that is a predictor that it will continue to escalate until they kill their intimate partner. So to stop a homicide, my gosh.
Yeah, well, and it's often when that victim stands up for herself, for the most part.
Yes, leaving is the most dangerous.
When it becomes the most lethal.
Yes. And we saw that recently with the Derek Horton case and Amber Griffin. They had many dismissed domestic violences, and the victims are pressured greatly to drop the charges. They're dependent on their abuser for finances and a place to live. And it's very sad, because had we been able to intervene sooner, maybe something could have changed. So that's the kind of case that keeps me motivated.
Yeah.
No more Amber Griffins.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about how does the intervention court work?
So when someone either pleads guilty or is found guilty at trial, they're determined guilty of domestic violence, then they're put on probation with my probation officer. Right now, her name is Shannon Wagner. I have to give a shout out to her, and it will be changing to Madeline Heisler. They are amazing, and that's who we'll call them participant reports to. So they are screened for alcohol abuse, drug abuse, mental health needs. And in most cases, those needs are coupled with the fact that they are controlling and abusive with their intimate partner. So sobriety is a condition of probation. They have fines and costs, of course, of the crime itself. And then the biggest component is the healthy relationships counseling. And that's what Julie Robert and Robert Chattel do. And it used to be called, the program is officially titled Batterers Intervention. And so when I took the bench, I said, this is a terrible name. And people said, oh yeah, the victims hate it. They don't want to admit that they're with a batterer. And the defendants don't want to admit I'm a batterer. So I said, let's change the name and let's call it, and I just picked it out of the sky, Healthy Relationships. And, it's that type of simple change. Like, yeah, that sounds a lot better. It's the same thing, but that makes people really want to invest in it. I want a healthier relationship. I want him or her to have a healthier relationship. So it's those types of little changes I try to make that have made a huge impact.
So in the context of the healthy relationships counseling and domestic violence, what does that mean? What are your goals? What are you trying to help people see?
it actually breaks down the way that they look at a relationship, and there's a control wheel. There's many aspects to it, but to help you understand, most of the participants tell us, I wish I'd known this in high school, that I didn't need to follow my partner. I didn't need to read their text. I didn't need to tell them who they could be friends with, because that controlling aspect then leads to, hey, I saw you text someone and now there's a fight, and now I might have to throw something at you because I'm so mad, or throw you down on the bed, or slap you across the face, and then it just escalates. It's all based on control rather than the trust of a relationship and the ability of someone who is angered to say, I'm mad and I need to walk away and remove myself and not continue to escalate until I've made my point. And there's one gentleman that graduated. They all give a speech when they graduate, and a very affluent Battle Creek man, married with 3 children. And he talked about how I was doing what I thought I was supposed to. The man of the house who sets the rules, who disciplines anyone who breaks them. He said, I grew up that way, and I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And it was gut-wrenching to learn that I was doing everything wrong. But he kind of rebuilt himself, and he is one of those people that I cried when he was done. Like, this is amazing, because now those 3 children will grow up seeing something other than abuse and control.
Yeah. Is it a lifetime investment when someone goes through that? Do they have to continue that counseling?
They don't have to, but the
not in the terms of the probation.
Yes,
but
they're released from probation, but so many of them are continuing as a mentor. And Julie Robert, for example, lets them continue to attend for free once they're done. There's a price for the counseling, of course, and to have them mentor some of the people. Most of them are angry when they go in. I'm being forced to do this. How dare that judge tell me that I'm wrong in my relationship? And to watch them throughout the program, because we have courtroom reviews, you just see them start to change. Like, well, that did make sense. But it still doesn't apply to me to, wow, things are really starting to get better. And it's just a whole change of thought process, which is hard to do. We're all raised with certain, what we see with ethics and morals that our parents teach us. Doesn't mean they're right just because we grew up with it.
We're all products of our environment.
Yes.
Right? And most of what we learn as human beings, we learn subconsciously.
Exactly.
It's hard to admit that, but of all the things happening, we're only aware of a little bit.
And think of how many times you've heard someone say, well, my parents raised me to fill in the blank.
Yeah.
So we're taking that fill in the blank and saying, yeah, your parents were wrong. And that's a hard thing for anyone to accept.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's reminding me of, as long as I've been, as a journalist covering issues, which domestic violence has always been a big issue wherever I've worked, attitudes and understanding and ignorance about domestic violence. I mean, we stereotype it, right? It's the guy in the tank top T-shirt, right?
Right.
It's
No, it's
but
not.
it's all walks of life.
It is.
I mean, you just mentioned the affluent man with the.
Yes.
Yeah.
All walks of life. I mean, we've had some individuals that are known gang members, but have thrived in the program, that I hope that they can take what they learned and apply it to the rest of their life. But absolutely all walks of life. Many same-sex couples. Sometimes the woman is the perpetrator. So it's not just the man, it's anyone who is trying to control someone, and their own insecurity is a big part of that too.
Right. Do you have data on how many people have gone through and their recidivism rate? I mean, if they go through, are they a lot less likely to be back in front of you?
I do, and I should have brought the numbers. I do know the recidivism rate. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, we had our first person who was charged with another assaultive crime, not with his intimate partner. In fact, he was sticking up for her, but he was the first graduate to be charged again with, this was assault and battery. So prior to him, none of our graduates have, if we include that he wasn't charged with domestic violence. None have reoffended. I know we've had close to 200 come through. Many have not made it. We have a warrant list right now of probably 40 people who have fled and absconded. So it doesn't work for everybody, but for those that it does work for, it's worth every second that we pour into it.
Yeah.
It's a generational change. It's one of those, this really will stop the cycle.
Yeah. I wanted to shift a little bit more personal. I mean, you shared that, your father's death,
Yeah.
and then your own diagnosis. You lost your husband.
Yeah.
And was it a year?
No, it was just December 23rd.
December. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you had COVID as well.
I did. I had COVID a year ago right now, and I almost died. That was, I don't know, it was, of course, horrible, but I look at the worst things that happen as I know it's a gift because something big is going to come out of this. And I learned that with my dad. That was the first terrible thing I experienced, losing him.
Yeah.
And even my husband's cancer. I mean, we posted a lot about his journey and how much we just trusted in God's will. And that wasn't just talk. That's how we believed. We didn't really sit around and cry about it. We had our moments.
Sure.
And since he's passed, I haven't really sat around and cried. I probably need to more. I might still be in shock, but life is temporary, but the way that you as a human treat other people, that's forever. And that's how you will be remembered. How do you treat people? Forgiveness, kindness. I mean, those are the traits that I really work toward, and I'm not perfect at it. It's difficult sometimes to forgive, but last year when I had COVID, I just felt, I don't care who's wronged me or what they've done. I absolutely forgive, and I hope that they're okay.
Yeah. When we really got acquainted, really just last week, we've seen each other in passing, in different places. But you had shared that you felt that, your wayward youth, if we want to use that, although you obviously had a way, even if you did that, that it really made you a better advocate and a better judge.
Oh, I think so completely.
Yeah.
Because I mean, and I don't want to compare myself to my bench mates in any negative way,
Sure.
but there's some really great people that have just had some very lovely lives, and maybe didn't make the mistakes that I made, and didn't have, they went to undergrad, they went to law school, and they have been practicing ever since, and now they're on the bench, and so intelligent and so smart. I don't know if they ever had the same experiences, or they certainly aren't as open about them. For example, after I left Michigan State, I moved to Colorado for a year, and I was homeless for about a month and a half. And just kind of couch surfing, sleeping in the car. I called my parents and they were like, you did this, you figure it out. And I couldn't believe it. But even for that short period of homelessness, I feel for people in the courtroom when they come in. I don't have any place to live right now. And I don't know that any other judge has had that experience. Having absolutely no money, just picking bad partners. I had a terrible relationship at Michigan State that was one of the worst things you can imagine. And now I look and I watch people in court and I think, that's why this happened to me. And I just have a connection with this person and I know how to speak with them. So I'm so grateful for every bad thing because it just that's why I did that. That's why that happened.
Yeah. And, I just want to talk, and it's coincidental completely, but my guest next week has also suffered some loss. And we talked a lot about grief in our prep conversation. And in her case, she's an artist, but how much it's enriched her work. And would you say the same?
Absolutely. I've realized that this life is meant to be difficult. It's not meant to be this perfect field of flowers. It's meant to be difficult, and how we choose to overcome the difficulties we face are what defines us. So I used to say, leave it better than you found it. Now I say, it's not what you did, it's what you do next. And that when I tell people in the courtroom that, they just can't believe it. I'm not judging you because you were found guilty of a crime. What are you going to do next? That's how I'm going to remember you. And that's how I look at everyone, people who have done anything. I mean, some of the most successful people in this town do cruel things, or they have done. What are they going to do next? Are they going to say, I'm not going to be that way anymore. I'm going to be kinder. I'm going to try to devote true good back into the community. That's what I'll remember about them. So I hope people remember that about me, not what I did, but what I just kept trying to do next.
Wow. I wanted to ask you, we talked about this before, our judiciary, our judicial system is not perfect.
Right.
What do you think needs to change, or what kind of changes? We've talked about it already, but just speaking broadly, how do we make our judiciary more responsive to our people?
Well, it's made up of human beings. And like I said, it's the best system in the world, but it's very flawed because it's made up of humans. And I think people from a very young age don't understand the laws that govern them and that they're expected to live up to. The judiciary needs to be more forgiving and more focused on helping people overcome their situation. When we're looking at so many just very underprivileged people who know nothing else. They know a life of, I need to steal to feed my family and maybe be involved with the gang because that pays well. I had a guy once, I told him, you've got to get a job. And he pulled out, he said, I have $10,000 right here. I'm not going to go get a minimum wage job. Put it back in his pocket. And I can't even imagine that. My first job was McDonald's. And I think that's another great thing that happened. Your customer service, you want to make people happy and do your job correctly. So I think we need to really understand that these aren't our neighbors that messed up in terms of the person literally next door, but they're people in our community that we have no concept how they live. So one of the programs I'm working on right now to bring to our judiciary, and I forget the name, but it's one of those exercises where you start with, here's X amount of money, and these are all the things that you need to spend it on this month. And you need to get insurance and get groceries, and there's gas for your car. But I was only given $200. That's right. You don't have a savings account that you can dip into or a credit card you can use. And I think we forget that. And of course we do. We don't focus in our day-to-day life on that, but we need to be reminded of, we serve these people. And I am a big proponent of saying that constantly. We make our living on the taxpayers' money. We were elected to serve, not to rule. I am not a queen. No crown came with it. A robe came with it, but to serve you. So it doesn't matter who you are or what you've done. I'm here to serve you. And I absolutely act that way every day.
The other side of that, and you said it here, it's the best system in the world. Why do you still believe in it?
Because it is balanced in when it's working correctly. Our police, we have to support our police. I see the problems that exist and the changes that need to happen. And there are so many great officers in all of our jurisdictions here in Calhoun County that want to do the right thing. If you, anyone, I would say, if you are having a hard time with it, ask to do a ride along and see what they have to deal with. I've done that before, and it's nothing that you would ever want to do again. What they, how they are spoken to and what they see every day. So they're not perfect either, but they're trying to uphold the laws. And then if you break the law, it is their job to then basically inform the prosecutor's office the law has been broken. They need to have the resources to then aptly charge what has happened. And a lot of times people, I didn't know I couldn't do that. We literally hear this like, okay, well, now you're in the system. And being in the system mars you for life. It will follow you with job interviews or, going to college. It's something that that is being worked on right now to remove records, which is a great step. But then
Yes.
you have a great defense to make sure everything happened. Each piece has to work so well. And then a fair judge who has no bias. I mean, we're humans, we have bias, but who wants to look at everything without, like, we don't have a horse in this race. Whereas a defense attorney, I would just be sick. I have to do everything. No, a judge is like, sit back and tell me and argue to me, and I'll make sure that this is handled fairly. So that's a great system. They're in the Middle East, you're accused of stealing, well, we'll chop your hand off. You won't do that again. Can you imagine? And it's happening right now. Someone's hand is being chopped off.
You mentioned something before. I've often thought about how, police officers and people who live in the toughest environments and neighborhoods, they're both exposed to, unimaginable levels of trauma.
Yes.
That most of us never have to endure. And so you have this kind of toxic stew of people relating to each other, being on opposite sides, and it's very volatile.
It is, and the police here do such a great job of, let's go play basketball with the kids. Let's help this lady mow her lawn. I mean, they want to know folks as human beings. But when you call the police, you call 911, they have to react as the police, as the enforcement. And if a law was broken, they have to act. And especially with domestic violence, I hear this all the time. Well, I didn't want him arrested. I just wanted him out of there for the night.
Right.
Well, that's not what the police are for. They're to come and determine if a crime has occurred, not to help you run your household. Right. I've had police officers tell me they literally get called. Can you come get my kid up? He won't go to school today. Like, no, that's not what they're for. So there's this big misperception.
Sure.
Well, when things aren't going right in my house, I'll just call 911. That's not, but it's something that's being worked on. All this focus on the police and there are officers around the country that have clearly overstepped their bounds. So that's another example of something terrible has happened, but something good's going to come out of it. I believe it. Those that lost their lives are the heroes, whether you like them or not. I hear the argument about George Floyd. He was a criminal. Do we kill people who have a counterfeit bill? Is that a capital crime? No, it's not. And of course, there's so many aspects to that. But George Floyd, however you feel about it, has put a highlight on the interaction, and good will come from that. And he will be remembered. He didn't want to be the face of this change that's happening, but that will be his legacy, and he has given back. No police officer wants to be the next one on the news and charged for hurting someone like that for a misdemeanor.
Tracy, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. I think we could talk for another hour, and maybe I'll have you back sometime. How about that?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you, folks, for tuning in. I mentioned we have an artist next week. And here is another comment, Todd Greenman. Hey, Todd.
Hi, Todd.
My Historical Society board mate. But next week, Jenny Hepler-Takens. You've probably seen her art.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Well, she's coming on next week, and we just had an amazing conversation, even talking about doing this program. So you'll want to check that out.
I will.
All
she
right.
knows my uncle, Scott Smith.
Okay.
So bring that up.
I'll do that. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And everybody have a wonderful evening and a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. And